Thank you so much, Nettie, for inviting me, and it's wonderful to be here with the Twining Vine Sangha. Many friends here that I've met before, and it's lovely to see you again. And lovely also to meet the new people that I haven't met before here. And thanks to Alex too for hosting us today. So the topic of my talk today is from the Mumonkan, case 26. The Mumonkan is the gateless barrier. Two monks roll up the blinds. The great Fai Yan of Qingliang took the high seat before the midday meal to preach to his assembly. Raising his hand, he pointed to the bamboo blinds. Two monks went and rolled them up in the same manner. Fai Yan said, "One gains, one loses." This time of pandemic has heightened our sense of gain and loss. So I would like to look at what that is. What is gain? What is loss? And how do we navigate those two apparent extremes? So I'll just repeat the story again for those of you not familiar with it. The great Fai Yan of Qingliang took the high seat before the midday meal to preach to his assembly. Raising his hand, he pointed to the blinds. Two monks went and rolled them up in the same manner. Fai Yan said, "One gains, one loses." Koans are helpful stories that point us in the right direction. Speaking of pointing, in the koan stories, we can embody the characters so that we can come to an understanding of them from the inside. Usually there is a monk or a nun or a tea lady who asks a direct question of the teacher. But in this case, it is the assembly, just like you, waiting to hear what the talk might be about, expectant. Then there is the teacher, Fai Yan, who raises his hand, pointing to the bamboo blinds. I invite you at this moment to join me in that pointing. Be Fai Yan. Wonderful, thank you. Yes, it's just that pointing. What a wonderful presentation. It's the first part of his talk, and he is presenting the essential world to us in the same way that the Buddha silently twirled a flower for his assembly. So what happens next? Two nameless monks step forward and roll up the blinds in the same manner, it says. Are they responding to Fai Yan's pointing? Or is it a bit dark in the room? The story doesn't tell us. Then we come to the third part of the story. Fai Yan says, "One gains, one loses." Again, the story doesn't tell us which monk gains or which monk loses. It feels like we're being pushed to decide which monk is the good guy and which one the no good. We are left with lots of unanswered questions. And a teacher who seems to have forgotten the lines of the Xin Xin Ming, that's verses on the faith mind by the third patriarch, Seng San, who wrote, "Gain and loss, right and wrong. Such thoughts must finally be abolished at once. If the mind makes no discriminations, the 10,000 things are as they are, of single essence." This koan really helps us to see how our discriminating mind works, small mind, as Suzuki called it. It always wants to make up its own story with cause, effect, emotional reactions, maybe emojis, interconnections, and before we know it, there is a soapy mini-series being concocted in our brain. That's very much like our experience of Zazen, isn't it? When we notice that a drama is unfolding in our thinking mind, we gently come back to our breath and it evaporates, and we are back to that place of no mind. Of course, sometimes there are real issues that do need to be dealt with, and it's always good to tell your true self that you will deal with that urgent issue after the meditation time and stick to that promise. Fa Yin said, "One gains, one loses." So which monk could possibly be the winner when the loser seems to be doing and acting in exactly the same way? This brings us to the fourth part of the koan. How does this story resonate with you? How does embodying each character of the story bring the teaching it holds alive for you? Only you can taste that. But I can suggest to you that right view, the first step of the Eightfold Path, lets us see that from the essential viewpoint, each action we do is just as it is. We stand, we sit, we laugh, we point as Fa Yin. No comparisons, no add-on extra stories. Lately, I've been hearing many commentators and Buddhist teachers commenting on the pandemic and its effects. Maybe you too have been reflecting on this in your life. On the one hand, we have stress, constant change, illness, sadly perhaps the passing of loved ones. On the other hand, we have reaching out for connection to family and friends. We have a new appreciation and awareness of the fact of impermanence, one of the Buddha's 3 marks of existence. And we have via Zoom this wonderful connection today of people living at great distance, coming together to share the Dharma, which we would not have experienced before. So is it gain or is it loss? Thich Nhat Hanh has written much about interdependence and the word he coined, interbeing. In The Miracle of Mindfulness, he wrote, "Life will be seen as infinitely precious, every second of it worth living. And it is not just our own lives that are recognized as precious, but the lives of every other person, every other being, every other reality. We can no longer be deluded by the notion that the destruction of others' lives is necessary for our own survival. We see that life and death are but 2 faces of life, and that without both, life is not possible, just as 2 sides of the coin are needed for the coin to exist." So, going back to our koan, is Fa Yin mistaken when he makes this pronouncement of winner and loser on the 2 monks, the 2 innocent monks? Yun Men, who compiled the koan collection The Gateless Barrier, commented, "You will see where the national teacher Fa Yin failed." He is saying, what a magnificent failure it is that he puts that doubt and sincere questioning in our minds and the minds of the assembly in order to spur us on to look into our true nature. That is Fa Yin's compassionate attitude. Let me tell you a little about Fa Yin that will help you to understand his teachings. He lived in China in the Tang dynasty. That was around about the 900s AD. When he was younger, he went on pilgrimage as was the custom for monks, to test his understanding and visit different teachers. One day he visited Di Tsang. Di Tsang asked Fa Yen, "What is your journey?" Fa Yen said, "Going around on pilgrimage." Di Tsang said, "What do you expect from pilgrimage?" Fa Yen said, "I don't know." Di Tsang said, "Not knowing is most intimate." Intimate is a word often used to express that deep and tender state of no separation. You would have seen on the railway platforms here and also in UK, I think, they have written "mind the gap" so that you won't accidentally slip down onto the railway tracks. Well, in Zen practice, we have mind the no gap. We come back to our breath and are aware of that place of no labels, just seeing what is. When Fa Yan said, "I don't know," he was expressing his state of getting up each morning, walking each step of his road of pilgrimage, meeting the teacher, bowing. We too are on a daily pilgrimage. We don't need to spend a lot of money on a trip to El Camino. We can take that spirit of pilgrimage into our daily tasks, into greeting the bodhisattva of compassion in each person we meet, in being open as Fa Yen was to those Dharma gates that are always opening for us with the song of the magpie, the clink of the dishes, the wind in the trees. Sometimes people say that during the pandemia, they developed not knowing mind. What they mean is that where once we had the illusion of certain certainties, now we know that all is in flux. It's good that they are now face to face with impermanence in a world where being face to face with friends and family is so often impossible. However, Di Tsang's not knowing is deeper than that. He is pointing to that place before words, before up or down, before gain or loss, right or wrong. It is intimate because it is the whole world, the vast unknown sitting right here. Our Zen practice is always dealing with what is. We notice our leaning towards something or leaning away from it because we imagine there is something out there to gain or lose. But just being aware of that leaning, that disposition of mind, can bring us back into right view, a steady wholeness. Steve Hagen in Meditation Now or Never wrote, "In meditation, we come to see that every moment is life and death, that we actually live with these two merged all the time. The situation we're in is always critical, and in each moment there is something urgent for us to do. Wake up." So rather than being at the mercy of our thoughts and fears, which that sense of gain and loss brings, we can come back to being here and now. Your practice gives you that skills to do that. Every day, we just roll up the blinds to being awake. Sometimes it's the fear of loss and also the fear of gain that paralyzes us, isn't it? And then there is the gaining idea of getting better and better at our practice. And we get annoyed because that serenity we hope for always seems to elude us. But really, there is just coming back again and again, dropping all gaining ideas, just returning to this shining, miraculous moment. We live in this world of loss, of losing our job, of gaining a house, of losing a loved one, of gaining a grandchild. But it is the same as the world of no loss, no gain, no divisions, and from where we act in peace and harmony. In the Gateless Barrier, and also other koan collections, there's usually a poem where the compiler, in this case Wu Men, conveys his understanding of the koan. Actually, these poems are wonderful koans in themselves. Here is the poem for this case of the rolling blinds, as translated by Robert Aitken. When they are rolled up, the great way is bright and clear. But the great sky still does not match our way. Why don't you throw away that sky completely? Then not a breath of wind will come through. I'll read it again so you can take it in. When they are rolled up, the great way is bright and clear. But the great sky still does not match our way. Why don't you throw away that sky completely? Then not a breath of wind will come through. When they are rolled up refers to the blinds. This could be a realization that we have coming to a guiding stage on our path. But it also could just be our daily practice, our daily steps of pilgrimage. Dogen said, practice is enlightenment. Enlightenment is practice. Then we see that bright and clear great way. But the great sky still does not match our way. This is referring to the way of the Bodhisattva. Why don't you throw away that sky completely? Wu Men is urging us to throw away clinging to that bright clarity, but to return to this everyday life, which is the Bodhisattva path of compassion. Then we are not pulled about by the winds of wanting this, rejecting that, gaining here and losing there. It's interesting that the poem says that not a breath of wind will come through. In the Lokavi Pati Sutta, the Buddha described the 8 worldly concerns, or, as he called them, the 8 worldly winds. These are the 4 opposing states of praise and blame, pleasure and pain, fame and disrepute, gain and loss. He saw gain and loss as winds that pull us this way and that. I'd also like to read you, and it might be interesting for those of you familiar with this koan, Dan Layton's translation of this verse. To raise blinds is to fathom empty skies of illumination. Skies vast and empty, and still not our household inheritance whole. Still nothing like tearing down those empty expanse blinds, leaving intimacy, so 4 winds distances open, past knowing. As you can hear, Chinese lends itself to very poetic translation. When I first started sitting with koans, my teacher Paul suggested writing a poem to express my understanding of the koan. This is a very traditional way, but I found it very helpful and inspiring because to write a poem, you have to internalize your intellectual, emotional, and imaginative being at that not knowing level. Then you find the poem writes itself. You may like to try that yourself sometime with whatever your practice. For example, breath in, of computer. Breath out. So it can be a very simple poem. Going back to small mind and big mind, Suzuki wrote, "Big mind is something to express, not something to figure out. Big mind is something you have, not something to seek for." So there are no words needed to express this big mind, just like Fayen's pointing. In the Heart Sutra, we chant that there is no wisdom and no attainment to be achieved. So once we accept that gain and loss are just two sides of the same wholeness, and as well we accept that there is nothing to be attained, since far beyond delusive thinking, right here is nirvana, then like Fayen, we can stand up, sit down, wash the dishes, make the tea in great freedom and peace. Thank you for listening.